Good morning. This is our annual Christmas message. And in the December monthly letter, you will find the Christmas message given at the study center last year. And if it touches you as it has me, you will wonder why there is need for another Christmas message. And the answer is a very important one. Many students, even after they are on a spiritual path, are seeking something in the nature of a truth or a message that will change the nature of their lives, improve it, but they think actually that there is some truth, some message that you can find in a book or a Bible that is going to do this, and usually do it quickly. There is no such thing as a message or a teaching that can have that power. There is a truth, a startling truth, revealed by the great spiritual mystics of all ages, but it cannot be received by us, it cannot be accepted by us, because it cannot be understood through the mind. The natural man receiveth not the things of God. And therefore, the natural man, with his reasoning, thinking mind, never can grasp truth. And even if the miracle of the truth were given, it would benefit no one. There is a wonderful story that has been in existence for over 4,000, probably 5,000 years, illustrating this, of a time when truth was known, the truth, the ultimate of truth, and some men wanted to know this truth, and they determined to find it out. It has always been believed that it would take an individual anywhere from 6 to 9 years to be able to grasp truth, even though when the truth was given to him, it would be given to him in one sentence. Yet it has always been considered, even back there 4,000, 5,000 years ago, that there must be a time of 6 to 9 years before an individual's consciousness could be prepared to receive the truth. Well, these men determined to have it sooner than that. And whether or not they received it, it did them no good. So it has been ever since that men have tried to give truth in a capsule. Men have even tried to give truth in a book. But it doesn't work. It just isn't possible. The natural man, the mind of man, the mind with which or into which he is born, cannot accept truth. And therefore, there must be a period between the time that his interest in truth is aroused to that time when his consciousness is prepared to accept it. In other words, to that point of spiritual discernment. Paul makes all of this clear in his teachings, and we should all know this, that even though that final sentence were given to us, it would be meaningless. And so it has been with the Christmas message. For many years, we have had a Christmas message every year. If you read each one of these messages, and they are all preserved in our books of the letters that are published each year, you will find that whereas the principles do not vary, there is always enough difference in the message so that a different idea is brought to light. If you were to read each one of these Christmas messages, you would discover that perhaps at the end of the reading you would have a fuller grasp of the nature of the Christmas than just by reading one at a time. In other words, a little something or other would come back from each one of these past messages and form a greater whole. But actually what you would discover is this, that your own consciousness had developed over the years, so that that which you had read only with the mind, now you are beginning to discern through the soul faculties, through the power of spiritual discernment. And so you are getting closer and closer to the point of realization. Now, so as to make this completely clear to you, I would like to, use this for an illustration. In our metaphysical lives, and it makes no difference what your metaphysical background may be or may have been, you will remember that over and over and over you have heard it said that error isn't power, or evil isn't power, or disease isn't power. Sometimes even sin isn't power. And of course everyone would like to believe this. It's a very satisfying philosophy. In fact, I don't know of anything that could be nicer than to believe or be able to believe that disease isn't power, or that sin isn't power, or that lack and limitation, poverty isn't power. But we are faced with a world in which not only evil is power, it seems to be a great deal more powerful than good. First of all, there never should have been a metaphysical teaching to the extent or in essence stating that evil is not power, because there never has been a time when this was true. Nor have any of the religious mystics taught such a thing. What Christ Jesus taught and demonstrated was that in the presence of spiritual consciousness, the fourth dimensional consciousness, that the evils of this world were not power. He not only taught this, he demonstrated it with his healing power. Healing of sin, healing of disease, healing of lack. He demonstrated, he proved conclusively that wherever he walked, the nothingness, the non-power of human evil was demonstrated and proved. He likewise proved that in some degree, wherever his disciples walked, evil had less power. Not to the extent that it was nullified in his presence, because, as he indicated, they had not yet attained a sufficient fullness of spiritual consciousness or fourth dimensional consciousness. Therefore, what metaphysics has really been saying or wanting to say is that in the presence of either a natural or a cultivated spiritual consciousness, evil would lose its reality, would lose its power, and the spiritual power of good would be revealed. Now, this too has been proven for the past century, that wherever there is an individual who either naturally has developed or come into this world with a fourth dimensional or spiritual consciousness, or wherever through study, application, devotion, this consciousness has been developed, evil loses its reality and its power. Now, there is no longer any question that this is true. There was a grave question when this was originally brought to the attention of the world, and this teaching was bitterly fought by the church, by materia medica, and through these by the law. Today, regardless of where you travel in the world, not only this is not fought, but as a matter of fact, such teachings are encouraged. It was quite a concession made 2 weeks ago by a newspaper just outside of Washington, D.C., in an editorial in which it made the acknowledgement that I guess we have to acknowledge that spiritual power, spiritual healing is here to stay. It has been proven. And the editor was shocked because until recently he hadn't heard about it. Now, when you hear, as you are going to hear increasingly, that more and more churches are encouraging the study and practice of spiritual healing. And when you learn, as you soon are going to learn, that in some very important places in the medical world, that they too are investigating officially this subject, what you will have to keep in mind as a pioneer is this: the only contribution you can make is in the degree that you yourself know that there is nothing of a miraculous nature about spiritual healing, that there is nothing of a miracle involved, nor is it the bringing of God into the picture in order to get God to do what the doctor can't do or what the minister can't do. I believe that this has been a deterrent to the understanding, the general understanding of spiritual healing, in that too many people have believed that God is doing for them what heretofore they expected their minister or their doctor to do for them. And this really has held back the understanding of the entire subject. Now, Christmas is involved in this entire subject because Christmas represents the birth. In the religious world, the mistake has been that Christmas is identified with the birth of a man. And actually, the birth of a man has nothing to do with it, and nothing to do with Christmas whatsoever. Christmas has to do with the birth of the Christ, the birth or recognition or coming to awareness of the transcendental consciousness, which before the birth is not only unknown but cannot be experienced. For instance, when Moses was a shepherd, in spite of the fact that he had been educated, highly educated, in Egypt, at a time when Egypt was at the height of its educational experience, that he was not only educated in all of the cultures and sciences and wisdoms, but also in the occult. But with all of this, he still remained a shepherd. A transformation took place in Moses on a Christmas day. On a day in which was born in the consciousness of Moses the realization of the truth of this transcendental spiritual consciousness, that which is above knowing or being known, that which is above the mind, that which really only comes in a period of unknowing, a period of silence, when the mind is still, the reasoning faculties, the thinking faculties, and it becomes possible to receive from the infinite consciousness and awareness of the infinite consciousness. Remember that we are born only into a knowledge of our own limited human mentality. We have no awareness in our early days, except the few who are blessed with coming into this world mystically. But otherwise, we have no knowledge that there is anything beyond our own mind. We have no knowledge that there is anything beyond our own education, beyond whatever wisdom we pick up between the cradle and the grave. But to Moses, in this instant of high consciousness, of high awareness, meditation, there comes this otherness. In mystical literature, it is sometimes called a presence or the presence. In the Oriental world, it's called the Buddha mind, or Buddhi, or Satori, a moment of illumination. Whatever name you give it, what really happens is that an ordinary human being with no other knowledge than his own human mentality, in an instant becomes aware of something greater than himself, something greater than his mind, something greater than his knowledge. In fact, from now on, from this Christmas moment, the moment of the divine birth, knowledge and wisdom pour into the individual far greater than anyone has ever had from the reading of books. Now, the Master, in teaching this, revealed that before Abraham was, I am. Therefore, this that I am, this transcendental self, this divine consciousness, existed before the birth of Jesus. In fact, it existed before Abraham was. And Abraham, you know, the reason he used the name Abraham was that Abraham was considered to be the father of the Hebrew race, the origin of the Hebrew race, the beginning of the Hebrew race. And therefore, before the Hebrew race began, this divine consciousness existed. And it existed to manifest itself forth as the experience of Abraham, Moses, and now Jesus. But before Jesus, it existed. Therefore, the important part of Christmas is not that Jesus was born, but that Christ was revealed. And this is the important part of Christmas now. Not that we should celebrate the birth of a man, though this does not detract in any way from our love of the man or respect for the man or devotion to that man's devotion, but rather that we understand why we have this feeling of veneration, of love for Jesus Christ. Because he was one of the few who had the courage to reveal to the world that this is not the secret about a holy man, but this is the secret of a holy consciousness which is available to all mankind, all who will open themselves to the Christ, that which was before Abraham. As you read this story, as you hear this story, year in and year out, eventually it gets under your skin. It gets beyond your mind and reaches that area of you which can be awakened. Every child that is born has an area of his consciousness which is dormant. And insofar as mankind is concerned, most men go through their entire lifetimes, and women, without this area of consciousness ever being awakened. It is only the few in the history of the literature of the world, only the few, who have ever had the experience of the awakening of that dormant part of consciousness. Well, for centuries it was believed that this could only happen to the few. Ah, yes, back in the days of Egypt and up until 200 A.D., it was known that those who had an inclination toward the spiritual and who could find a teacher on the spiritual path could be awakened. After that, in the Western world, this teaching was omitted from all teachings, and therefore the only record we have of any who have been awakened of those who came to it through some inner experience of their own without being able to account for it. One such illustration, you know, is the experience of Jacob Böhm, the German cobbler, who, for some unknown reason, while actually cobbling in his shop, looked up and saw the sun shining on a rock. And something happened between himself, within himself, and that ray of sunshine on the rock. And all of a sudden this inner consciousness was opened, and he discerned spiritually. He saw reality. And of course he became the father of the mysticism of the Middle Centuries. He had many students, some who were opened through him or through his teaching. In the Orient, in particular in India and Japan, the teaching never died out that if you could find a spiritually enlightened individual, one in whom the soul center was opened, that individual could open students. And so we have had spiritual students in the Orient all through the ages. You may wonder why every student wasn't opened who went to these masters, because only a few were opened. Well, that was the experience then and will be now. And the answer lies in the word dedication. Many would like to be opened. Many would like to be spiritually illumined. If only it could be done in spare time and with spare change. Oh, if only it wasn't going to take too much time or too much money. But you let the element of time and money enter, and you soon find antagonism to the spiritual awakening. What element does time play? Well, time plays this element. If this were merely an intellectual truth which could be imparted, then it would only be necessary to own a Bible. It could be a Hebrew Testament, Christian Testament, Oriental Scripture, and it would be done because there is sufficient truth in any of these to do it. Or there have been some very good metaphysical and mystical writers in this past century, and in any one of the authentic ones, there is enough truth to do it. But it isn't the truth that will do it. It is knowing the truth. And that knowing doesn't mean reading it, affirming it, stating it. It really means knowing. That is, attaining the actual awareness of it. And that takes time. That takes time. We can read these books and as I have told our students so often in class instruction, if you think for a moment that the truth lies in my books, you are going to look in vain, because you can read them all the way through and not find it. The truth is within your consciousness. The reading of these books, the study of them, the practice of principles will lead you to that truth within yourself, develop it, and in the end bring about the Christ birth. The books will not do it of themselves. Your dedication is what does it. Where does money enter in? Well, books cost money. Teachers must live. Centers must be provided or paid for. It isn't that the money in and of itself will buy it for anyone. No use of anyone believing that they can write out a check for $1,000 or $10,000 and have it. No. It isn't money in that sense. You cannot buy it with money. But there is a certain amount of money involved in the incidentals. Be assured of this. Yes, I'm going to use this illustration for this. I think this fascinates me. There is a book available this Christmas for children, tiny little bit of a one, by a cartoonist, and the subject of it is security, how security is attained. Some of you have undoubtedly seen it, probably bought it for children. Very entertaining. It shows a dog and his doghouse. And it says, security is when you own your own home. And it shows a schoolboy coming home from school. And it says, security is when you find your mother is home in the kitchen when you get there. Security is having someone to lean on. Oh, it's a whole little book of cartoons showing the different way that security is made evident to children and animals. One of our students made a book based on that, showing what security is from the infinite way standpoint. That security lies in meditation, and security lies in grace. Security lies in withinness. security lies in understanding the nature of God as individual consciousness. And there you have it. The moment that a spiritual student believes that truth is in a book, or in a teaching, or in a church, or in a teacher, they are making it external, just as external as if they place their security in their property or in their employment. Spiritual truth and wisdom is not in a book. Ye search the Scriptures, thinking that ye find truth therein. No. Scriptures reveal where truth is to be found within you. And books of mysticism, of spiritual wisdom, cannot give you truth. They can only reveal where truth is to be found. They can reveal where health is to be found, where safety is to be found, where security is to be found, and then the individual student must locate it there, must experience it there, so that, like Moses, Isaiah, Jesus, that you actually have the experience of the birth of the Christ, the birth, the awakening of that transcendental consciousness which reveals to you, be not afraid. I am with you. And then all of a sudden you realize that's what Moses said. That's what Moses said. I am that I am. That's what Isaiah said. I. That is what Jesus revealed. I am the bread, the meat, the wine, and the water. Man shall not live by bread alone, for I am the substance, the food. I, the Spirit of God within me. I that existed before Abraham. Not Jesus, who was born a year or two BC, but I who am before Abraham. I am the substance of your life, the law of health, of harmony, of purity. A long, long time ago, the psychiatrist Jung discovered that the central theme of healing is God. Now we learn that in the university where the Freudian psychiatry is taught in Vienna, that they now have also accepted that God is the central theme and must be the central theme of healing. Of course, this is true. But just as Jung revealed that he was not speaking of the God of the churches, nor of the religion of the churches, but the God and the religion of the original revelators, so must you understand today, as a pioneer on this path, that the God you are turning to is not the God of the churches. The religion you are turning to is not the religion of the churches, as that religion is today, because they even are permitting their bishops to write books and acknowledge that their God isn't God. You must learn the nature of God and of prayer, even if intellectually at first, and abide with it, live with it, practice it, until you too have a Christmas morning, a morning of spiritual rebirth, adorning in your consciousness of the nature of the Christ, because when the Christ is born in you, evil begins to lose its reality. Don't expect that it's all going to disappear in one breaking of a bubble, because it isn't that way. It isn't that way in our individual experience. It isn't that way in the history of our students or our patients. It is an abiding with this Christmas experience, making every day of the year a Christmas day, a day of new rebirth, new dedication, and letting this Christ spirit that dawns on a specific day, let it increase. Let it become more and more powerful until eventually it takes over. That was the day in which Paul said, I live, yet not I. Christ liveth my life. In other words, again, it wasn't the man Jesus. The man that Jesus had been crucified. It was the Christ who took over the life of Paul and lived his life, went before him to make the crooked places straight, spoke through his lips, financed the churches when the churches couldn't finance themselves. So it is that with the first spiritual awakening, you begin to perceive that error lessens in your experience, probably slowly. Sometimes there is a healing of one nature or another that appears to be a miracle, and to our sense is. But do not be fooled by this and believe that all of a sudden you have the miracle of life, the key of life, and that your entire experience is going to be of that nature, because it isn't so. Even as Paul was teaching and preaching the Christ, he had to take a few bad licks from the human mind. Even the Master, Christ Jesus, who contributed so much to our knowledge of this transcendental consciousness, even he had to pay the price of crucifixion. Therefore, do not believe that this really means that with the birth of your first Christ experience, your first Christmas, that you are to live the rest of your days without problems, because it doesn't work that way. There may be quite a few periods of illness or of lack until you yourself are deeply rooted and find that this Christ completely takes over your experience. Then, of course, there will be the experience as others come to you for healing and then for teaching, and you find that vicariously you will be suffering their lives and their problems, and it will be just as bad an experience for you as if you yourself were undergoing them, and sometimes worse. Many a time you'll have the feeling, I'd rather take this problem over from you and suffer it for you than see you suffering it. But you won't be able to do it because life is an individual experience. The birth of the Christ, then, is your Christmas day and mine. It is that particular moment in which there is something in the nature of an awakening or in the nature of an awareness in which we do realize that something is now functioning of which we heretofore were not aware. It may only be in fleeting glimpses. It may be in a few individual experiences. But for all of us, the experience is the same. Paul had to wait 9 years for the fulfillment of the Christ in him before he could even go out into the ministry. I was thrown into the healing ministry within 2 years after my first experience, but I wasn't given the teaching ministry for 16 more years. It's very slow developing, very slow maturing. The reason is, well, probably in the understanding of the meaning of the word maturity. Maturity is the ability to think objectively, not through the conditioned mind. A person may be 40, 50, or 60, or 70 years of age and be immature. A person may have PhDs in several languages and be immature, because maturity has nothing to do with age or education. Maturity has only to do with the ability to think objectively, to see understandingly, to throw off the conditioning that we have been given through birth, race, education, whatnot. When the Freudian school can throw off its atheism and say God is the central theme of healing, they have reached maturity, because they have thrown off the conditioned mind, and they now can think through an unconditioned state of awareness. Every time that a person who has been brought up in some orthodox religion can throw off the restriction of a belief in a personalized God, and can realize that God never was a Hebrew, nor a Christian, nor a Buddhist, that God is spirit, they have attained their maturity. Those, regardless of their education or age, who must still personalize God, are immature. Now, this maturity is not given to us except by an inner grace. There is a something within us that prepares us for maturity. When maturity comes, it brings with us spiritually, a spiritual maturity brings with it the dawning of this otherness, this something of which we had not previously been aware, this something that actually goes before us to make the crooked places straight, to prepare mansions for us where heretofore there were hovels or ghettos. You see, and you must know this as pioneers on the spiritual, on the mystical path, you must know this, that the freedom that the Hebrew is to know in a Christian world, the freedom that the Negro and the African is to know in a white world, the freedom that an Oriental is to know in a Caucasian world. This freedom is not going to be attained by anyone's armies. This freedom is not going to be attained by marches. This freedom is going to be attained first through education, culture, and then spiritual development. These are the 3 steps necessary for the attainment of individual and collective freedom. You must never forget that in this land of the stars and stripes, we have witnessed the lack of freedom in many minorities. In New England, both the Jews and the Roman Catholics experienced it. In the South, the Negro and the Jew has experienced it, and the Catholic. In most parts of our nation, the Oriental has experienced it. But to each of these, the answer is the same. You have to earn your freedom, not with guns, with education, with culture, with spiritual development, until you are recognized by your fellow man as an equal. Until we are recognized by each other as equals, not because there is an army in back of me saying so, but because the way in which I have lived my life or the way in which you have lived your life testifies to equality. This subject plays an important part in our spiritual development because there is going to be another period in 1964 in which this country is going to be faced with more armies trying to enforce freedom, more marches, more taking up of weapons, American against American. And there's nobody out there in that world that has any solution for it. The only solution will be if we, as pioneers on the mystical path, can receive the Christ and loose the Christ so that evil loses its power, the evil in human consciousness, the error in human consciousness, loses its power in the presence of the Christ, that those on the spiritual path can loose. Now, it lies within your power to accept this truth, that there is in the consciousness of every individual who was ever born the Christ, the Son of God, the Spirit of God, that about which we have been speaking here this entire period. This presence exists in the consciousness of every individual on the face of the globe, and the spiritually illumined can awaken it in those still unillumined by their recognition of it. Now this is the modus operandi. Supposing we'll use this as an illustration. You are my students, and I am your teacher. What is my method of awakening you to spiritual awareness? And the answer is this. First, I meditate. I meditate in order to bring myself to the realization that within me, closer to me than breathing, within me is this kingdom of God, or the Christ, the Spirit of God, the Son of God, the presence and power of God is within me, since I and my Father are one. If this is true of me, I would have to be a horrible egotist not to realize that this is by divine decree. In other words, it is the decree of God that this Son of God be established in me. Therefore, I must realize God can have no special children. Therefore, this same presence is within you. God in the midst of you is mighty. The Spirit of God within you. And so as I meditate on this, and I realize in each and every one of you, Christ sits enthroned. The very Spirit of God, which is your bread, the source of your wisdom, because God is the mind of you, the source of your wisdom. And you cannot love yourself. Love is of God. Therefore, the love in your heart is really the love of God enthroned there. So the wisdom of God is enthroned in your mind, and the love of God is enthroned in your heart. The Spirit of God is enthroned in you closer than breathing. And with that recognition, I just get still. No more thoughts, no more words. I let the peace of God descend upon me. I let His Spirit bear witness with my spirit that this is truth. I remain for as long as I can in inner stillness, inner quietness, no thoughts, no words, that the Spirit of God itself may bear witness with my spirit and yours. And sooner or later, whether it happens the first time or the 101st time, I feel an answering click within me, a response, a weight dropping off my shoulder, an inner peace. And then I know that His Spirit has registered. Now, it may not register in every one of you on every occasion, but I'm sure that one of you or two of you or three of you will have responded and felt this presence touch you. And so it is that in time it reaches every one of you to some extent, and then you yourself must carry on from there to bring it into its fullness. Now, each time that you meditate, every day of the week that you meditate, for this purpose, someone out in the world is being awakened. And it can be a president, it can be a senator, it can be a congressman, it can be a prime minister, it can be someone somewhere, it can be a minister, a priest, a rabbi. We don't know, and we don't care. We're not here to get credit. We're not here to be praised. We're here only for one reason. We do know that everyone who receives some measure of spiritual illumination can awaken in some measure those who still sleep. Therefore, this is our function, and this is our contribution to the peace of the nation and to the peace of the world. Realize within yourself the Christ, the Christmas day. Let every day be a Christmas day of realization, and then loose that Christ into the world and let it touch those who are prepared. And thank you, a very marvelous Christmas season to you, and we'll meet before New Year's.